Commander Velkoth had lived for 300 years. In that time he had seen many different alien races. Some were like insects with group minds. Others were made of crystal and spoke using light. Some were like living gas clouds that floated through space. But humans were nothing special. At least that is what the report said. The human ship arrived at Crossroads Prime Station 3 days ago. It was a diplomatic vessel called Harmony's Edge. The station was a neutral place where different alien species met to trade and talk. Velkoth watched the humans through the large window of the observation deck. They looked weak. They had no armor on their bodies. They had no poison or sharp claws. Their senses were average. Nothing about them seemed dangerous. The human delegation had 3 people. Ambassador Patricia Monroe was a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She smiled often and seemed friendly. Captain Ryan Holland was a military officer. He stood straight and spoke little, but his eyes were always watching. Dr. Sophie Grant was a scientist who studied alien life. She was excited about everything she saw on the station. Velkoth's species, the Xanthari, looked like large insects with hard shells. They were one of the oldest races in the galaxy. They had powerful weapons and fast ships. Humans had only learned to travel faster than light about 100 years ago. Their technology was far behind. They came from a small blue planet in a quiet part of the galaxy. Nothing about them was impressive. When Ambassador Monroe met Velkoth for the first time, she held out her hand. This was how humans greeted each other. Velkoth touched her hand with his front limb. Her grip was firm but gentle. She looked directly into his eyes when she spoke. "Commander Velkoth, thank you for meeting with us," she said in Galactic Standard language. Her accent was strange, but her words were clear. "Earth is very happy to join the galactic community," Velkoth replied politely. A small device on his body translated his speech into words the human could understand. "Welcome, Ambassador Monroe. However, I must tell you that joining the Galactic Council is not easy. There are many tests. We must check your technology. We must study your culture. We must make sure you can work with other species." Patricia nodded. She had expected this. "We understand, Commander. We are ready for any tests. Humanity wants to learn from the other species in the galaxy. We have much to learn and perhaps something to offer as well." Over the next 3 days, the meetings went well. Patricia was smart and patient. Captain Holland answered questions about Earth's military honestly. Dr. Grant shared information about human biology and culture. Velkoth found them pleasant, if unremarkable. They seemed like a peaceful species that would fit well into the galactic community. Then, on the 4th day, everything changed. Velkoth was reviewing documents in the station's command center when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed across all the screens. His second officer shouted across the room, "Commander, 15 ships just appeared at the edge of the system. They are Krathul raiders." Velkoth felt his body go cold. The Krathul were the worst kind of enemy. They were huge reptiles with thick scales that could stop most weapons. They were strong enough to tear metal with their bare hands. They had no mercy and no honor. They attacked peaceful stations, stole everything valuable, and took prisoners to sell as slaves. They had been terrorizing the outer regions of the galaxy for decades. 15 Krathul warships against one small station. The station had some weapons, but not enough. Help would come, but it would take hours. Hours they did not have. "Send a distress signal to the nearest Xanthari fleet," Velkoth ordered. "All civilians to the emergency shelters. Security forces to defensive positions. Prepare for boarding action." The station erupted into controlled chaos. People of many different species ran through the corridors heading for safety. Velkoth's security teams grabbed their weapons and took up positions. On the tactical display, he watched the Krathul ships getting closer. They would be in firing range in 10 minutes. A communication came through. It was Captain Holland's voice. "Commander Velkoth, this is Captain Holland. We are preparing the Harmony's Edge for combat operations." Velkoth was confused. Why would the humans prepare for combat? Their ship was designed for diplomacy, not war. It had some basic weapons for self-defense, but nothing that could fight Krathul warships. "Captain Holland, your ship is not a warship. You have no duty to fight. Take your people and leave the system while you still can. The Krathul will not chase one small diplomatic ship." There was a pause. Then Holland's voice came back, calm and steady. "With respect, Commander, those 15 Krathul warships will destroy this station in less than 15 minutes. Your reinforcements will not arrive for 3 hours. We are not running away." Velkoth tried to make the human understand. "Captain, you will die. Your ship cannot win this fight. There is no shame in retreat. Save your crew. Ambassador Monroe's voice joined the conversation. Commander Velkoth, we have known you for only a few days, but in that time, you and your people have treated us with respect and kindness. You have welcomed us to the galactic community. Now you are in danger. Humans do not abandon their friends. That is not who we are. Dr. Grant's voice added, softer but just as determined. We stand with you, Commander. That is what humanity does. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even if it costs us everything. Velkoth stared at the communication device. He did not understand. These humans had known him and his people for less than a week. They owed the Zenthari nothing. Their logical choice was to escape. Instead, they were choosing to stay and fight an enemy they could not possibly defeat. On the tactical display, the small human ship undocked from the station. It moved into a position between Crossroads Prime and the approaching Krathul fleet. One tiny ship against 15 massive warships. It was suicide. Velkoth's second officer spoke quietly beside him. Commander, what are they doing? They must know they cannot win. Velkoth watched the human ship take up a defensive position. For the first time in his 300 years of life, he felt something strange in his body. A cold sensation that spread through his limbs. His species had a word for this feeling, though he had not experienced it since his first battle centuries ago. Fear, not fear of the Krathul. He had faced them before. This was different. This was fear of what he was watching. Fear of a species that would choose certain death over abandoning strangers. Fear of creatures that looked soft and weak, but possessed a courage that defied all logic. The Krathul warships entered firing range. Their weapons began to charge, targeting both the station and the small human vessel that dared to stand in their way. Velkoth realized that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. They were not unremarkable. They were not weak. They were something far more terrifying than any species he had encountered in 3 centuries of military service. They were willing to die for people they had just met. And somehow that was the most frightening thing of all. Warlord Greshkar looked at his tactical screen with satisfaction. Crossroads Prime was an easy target. The station had weak defenses and was filled with valuable cargo. There would be technology to steal, goods to sell, and slaves to capture. His 15 warships were more than enough to overwhelm the small station. The Krathul had been raiding this region of space for many years. Most species feared them. The Zenthari had powerful fleets, but their ships were always spread too thin. By the time help arrived, the Krathul would be gone with their prizes. Greshkar watched as the station's shields activated. They were already starting to fail under his fleet's opening attack. Plasma cannons fired streams of superheated energy. Missile batteries launched volleys of warheads. The station's defenses were melting away like ice in the sun. Then something unexpected happened. A small ship separated from the station's docking bay. It moved toward his fleet instead of running away. Greshkar leaned forward, studying the vessel on his screen. "What is that ship?" he demanded. His tactical officer checked the sensors. "It appears to be a diplomatic vessel, Warlord. Our scans show minimal weapons. It poses no threat," Greshkar laughed, a harsh sound like grinding rocks. "Fools, ignore that ship. Focus all weapons on the station. I want those shields down in 5 minutes." Aboard the Harmony's Edge, Captain Holland stood on the bridge. His face was calm, but his eyes were focused. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with quick, efficient movements. They all knew what was coming. They all knew they might die. But none of them were running. Lieutenant Jake Harris sat at the weapons station. He was young, barely 30 years old, but his hands were steady on the controls. "Captain, all weapon systems are ready. Nuclear warheads are armed. Railguns are charged. Point defense systems are online." Holland nodded. Behind him, Ambassador Monroe and Dr. Grant stood near the back of the bridge. Holland turned to look at them. "Ambassador, Doctor, this is your last chance. The escape pods can get you away from this fight." Patricia shook her head firmly. "We stay, Captain. We are all in this together," Sophie added quietly. "Show them what humanity is capable of, Captain Holland." Holland allowed himself a small smile, then his expression became hard and focused. "Lieutenant Harris, target their flagship. Prepare firing solution. Targeting solution ready, Captain. Weapons free. Fire." The Harmony's Edge opened fire. What came from the human ship was not like modern weapons used by most galactic species. No elegant beams of concentrated plasma. No sophisticated particle weapons. What emerged was something much older. something more primitive, and somehow far more terrifying. The railguns fired solid metal projectiles. They were accelerated by powerful electromagnetic fields to incredible speeds. These chunks of metal moved so fast that they became weapons of devastating power. They relied on nothing but speed and mass and the basic laws of physics that governed the universe. The Krathul flagship's shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They worked by redirecting beams of plasma or absorbing particle streams. But they could do nothing against solid metal moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The railgun rounds tore through the shields like they were not even there. They struck the Krathul warship's hull with tremendous force. Metal armor that could withstand sustained plasma bombardment simply shattered. Huge holes appeared in the hull. Atmosphere rushed out into space in glittering clouds of frozen air. But the humans were not finished. The Harmony's edge rolled to bring its missile tubes to bear. A dozen missiles launched, streaking through space toward the Krathul fleet. These were not the clean antimatter warheads that most advanced species used. These were nuclear weapons. Ancient technology that most of the galaxy had abandoned thousands of years ago. The first nuclear warhead detonated. In the middle of the Krathul formation, the explosion released tremendous energy in multiple forms. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out the electronic systems of 3 nearby Krathul ships. They went dark, tumbling through space without power. The blast of thermal radiation was so intense that it melted sensor arrays and scorched hull plating. The pressure wave from the explosion scattered the tight formation, throwing the massive warships off course. On Crossroads Prime, Velkoth watched in stunned silence. His translator picked up the panicked shouts from the Krathul command channel. He heard the confusion, the fear, the disbelief in their voices. His second officer spoke, voice shaking. "What kind of weapons are those? Our sensors have never seen anything like them." Velkoth finally understood. The humans had not brought advanced technology to this battle. They had brought something much worse. They had brought rage and violence wrapped in the laws of physics. They had brought weapons designed by a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to kill efficiently. Greshkar roared in fury as his flagship shuddered under the impact of the railgun rounds. 3 of his ships were disabled. His beautiful formation was in chaos, and that tiny human ship just kept coming. "All ships, target that vessel. Destroy it now." The remaining Krathul warships turned their weapons toward the Harmony's edge. Plasma cannons erupted in brilliant streams of superheated matter. Energy beams lanced through the darkness. Missiles by the dozens raced toward the human ship. The human ship moved like a dancer. It twisted and turned, dodging attacks that should have destroyed it. Small laser turrets on its hull fired rapidly, destroying incoming missiles before they could hit. Maneuvering thrusters fired in precise bursts, sliding the ship through gaps in the weapons fire that seemed impossibly small. And through it all, the Harmony's edge kept firing. Another railgun volley tore into a Krathul cruiser. Metal screamed as the kinetic rounds punched completely through the ship, entering one side and exiting the other. The cruiser broke apart, splitting into 3 pieces that spun away into the void. 2 more nuclear warheads detonated. The Krathul ships, designed to fight modern battles with energy weapons at long range, had no defense against these primitive but devastating explosions. Their shields could not stop the electromagnetic pulse. Their armor could not protect against the thermal radiation. The blast waves threw them into each other, causing collisions that damaged multiple vessels. Captain Holland gripped his command chair as the ship shook from near misses. A console exploded, showering sparks. The lights flickered. A damage report scrolled across his screen showing shield strength dropping to critical levels. "Shield strength at 30%, Captain," Harris reported. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. We cannot take much more of this. How many warheads do we have left?" 4 nuclear warheads remaining, sir. Railgun ammunition at 40%. Holland looked at the tactical display. 9 Krathul ships were destroyed or disabled. 6 remained, but they were no longer pressing their attack. They were hesitating, uncertain. Something they had never done before. They were learning to fear. "Target the 3 ships moving toward the station. Do not let them through." "Aye, Captain, firing." The Harmony's edge positioned itself directly between Crossroads Prime and the attacking Krathul ships. It was damaged. It was outgunned. But it was not retreating. The small human vessel stood its ground, protecting strangers it had known for only a few days. On the station, Velkoth finally found his voice. Order all defensive platforms to support the human ship. Give them everything we have. They're buying us time with their lives. We will not waste their sacrifice. The station's weapons joined the battle, adding their firepower to the human ship's assault. Together, they held the line. The battle raged for another 20 minutes. To Velkoth, watching from the command center, it felt like hours. The small human ship moved through space like a living creature, fighting with a fury that seemed impossible for something so damaged. The Harmony's edge was bleeding. Atmosphere leaked from multiple hull breaches in long streams that sparkled in the light of distant stars. One of its main engines was dead, leaving a dark scar where fire had burned through the hull. Its shields were gone completely, but it kept fighting. Another Krathel warship exploded as a railgun volley tore through its reactor core. The explosion was brilliant and brief, a small sun that blazed for a moment before fading to darkness. That made 10 enemy ships destroyed or disabled. The remaining 5 Krathel vessels were no longer attacking. They were backing away, their weapons silent. Velkoth had never seen the Krathel retreat before. They were predators who knew only how to attack. But now they were learning a new emotion: fear. On the bridge of his crippled flagship, Warlord Greshkar stared at his tactical display with disbelief. He had started this attack with 15 warships. Now he had 5, and 3 of those were badly damaged. His crew was dead or injured. His ship could barely move, and that tiny human vessel was still there, positioning itself between his fleet and the station, protecting, defending, refusing to die. His tactical officer spoke, voice filled with fear. Warlord, sensors detect multiple ships approaching at high speed. Synthari reinforcements will arrive in 30 minutes. Greshkar made his decision. Pride and honor meant nothing if you were dead. All ships retreat. Jump to hyperspace immediately. The 5 surviving Krathel warships turned and fled, their hyperspace engines activated, tearing holes in normal space. One by one they disappeared, running from a single damaged human ship that had made them understand what it meant to face a species that refused to surrender. In the command center of Crossroads Prime, cheers erupted from the various species present. They had survived. Against all odds, they had held the station. But Velkoth did not cheer. He stared at the tactical display, at the small icon representing the human ship. The Harmony's edge was barely moving now. Its remaining engine was firing at minimal power, just enough to maintain position. Velkoth could see the extent of the damage on his sensors. The ship should not still be functioning. By all logic, it should be a dead hulk drifting through space. But humans did not seem to understand logic. Or perhaps they understood a different kind of logic. The logic of protecting others. The logic of standing firm when running would be easier. The logic of courage that went beyond simple survival. "Commander," his second officer said quietly, "we should send rescue teams to the human ship immediately. They saved us. We must help them." Velkoth nodded. "Dispatch medical teams and engineers. I will go myself." 20 minutes later, Velkoth and his team docked with the damaged human vessel. The airlock opened with difficulty. The corridors beyond were dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in red shadow. The air was thin. Life support was failing. They made their way to the bridge. The door had been damaged in the battle and would not open fully. Velkoth's team had to force it open manually. What they found inside made Velkoth's body go still with respect. The bridge was a disaster. Consoles were shattered. Smoke hung in the air. Scorch marks covered the walls where fires had burned. But the crew was still at their stations. Captain Holland sat in his command chair. His uniform was torn and a field bandage covered a wound on his left arm. Blood had soaked through the bandage, but he was alive. He looked up as Velkoth entered, and somehow found the energy to smile. "Commander Velkoth, welcome aboard. Please excuse the mess. We had some unexpected visitors." Lieutenant Harris was slumped over his console, unconscious but breathing. Ambassador Monroe knelt beside him, pressing a cloth to a cut on his forehead. Her gray hair was disheveled and her diplomatic clothes were torn, but her hands were steady as she tended to the injured officer. Dr. Grant sat on the floor with her back against a wall. She had a gash on her forehead that had bled down one side of her face, but she was conscious and alert, watching the Zenthari rescue team with curious eyes even now. Velkoth approached Captain Holland slowly. He extended his front limbs in a gesture of profound respect that his species reserved for the greatest warriors. Captain Holland, Ambassador Monroe, Dr. Grant. On behalf of the Zinthari Empire and all species on Crossroads Prime, I offer our deepest gratitude. You saved thousands of lives today. You are heroes. Holland shook his head slightly, wincing at the movement. We are not heroes, Commander. We just did what was right. What any decent species would do. Patricia stood up, still holding the bloody cloth. We told you, Commander. Humans stand with their friends. That is who we are. That is what we do. Velkoth looked around at the damaged bridge, at the injured crew who had refused to abandon their posts. He thought about what he had witnessed. A single small ship holding the line against overwhelming force. Humans who chose death over retreat. A species that valued friendship and honor more than their own survival. He had lived for 300 years. He had seen many species. He had fought in countless battles. But he had never seen anything like this. My medical team will care for your wounded, Velkoth said. My engineers will repair your ship. Whatever you need, we will provide. It is the least we can do. Sophie spoke up from her position on the floor, her voice tired but amused. I do not suppose this counts as completing our diplomatic evaluation. Despite everything, Velkoth found himself making the clicking sound that was his species' version of laughter. Dr. Grant, I believe you have passed that evaluation quite thoroughly. As the Zinthari medical teams began treating the wounded humans, Velkoth stood at the broken viewport and looked out at the debris field. The remains of 9 Krathul warships drifted in space, monuments to what happened when predators met something more dangerous than themselves. He had felt real fear standing with humans. Not fear of them attacking him, fear of what they represented, fear of a species that could be gentle diplomats one moment and devastating warriors the next, fear of creatures who valued loyalty and friendship so highly that they would die for beings they barely knew. The galaxy had just learned something important. Humans looked soft and weak. Their technology seemed primitive. But beneath that unremarkable surface was something far more dangerous than advanced weapons or superior shields. Beneath that surface was the heart of a species that had spent thousands of years learning to work together, to protect each other, to stand firm against impossible odds. A species that had nearly destroyed itself with war and learned from that horror the true value of peace. A species that was willing to unleash hell itself to protect their friends. And Velkoth knew, with absolute certainty, that the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. 3 days had passed since the battle. The Harmony's Edge sat in one of the station's repair bays, surrounded by Zinthari engineering crews. They worked around the clock, replacing damaged hull sections, repairing engines, and restoring systems. The human crew had recovered from their injuries, though Lieutenant Harris still wore a bandage on his head. News of the battle had spread across the galaxy with surprising speed. Ships from dozens of different species made special trips to Crossroads Prime, just to see the small human vessel that had defeated a Krathul raiding fleet. Some came out of curiosity. Others came out of respect. A few came because they were afraid. Velkoth had spent the past 3 days reviewing tactical recordings of the battle. He watched the recordings again and again, trying to understand what he had witnessed. The more he watched, the more disturbed he became. The human weapons were crude by galactic standards. Kinetic projectiles and nuclear explosives were technologies that most species had abandoned thousands of years ago. Modern warfare used clean energy weapons, antimatter warheads, and sophisticated targeting systems. The humans used brute force and simple physics, yet their simple weapons had been devastatingly effective. The Krathul shields could not stop solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. Their armor could not withstand the primitive fury of nuclear explosions. Their formations had no defense against weapons that did not follow modern tactical doctrine. But it was not just the weapons. It was how the humans used them. Their tactics were aggressive, almost reckless. They moved their ship into positions that should have been suicide. They accepted damage that would have made other captains retreat. They fought with a determination that seemed to ignore the concept of surrender. Velkoth needed to understand. He requested a private meeting with Ambassador Monroe. They met in the observation lounge that overlooked the repair docks. Patricia arrived wearing fresh diplomatic clothes, though her face still showed signs of fatigue from the battle. She accepted Velkoth's invitation to sit, and for a moment, they both watched the engineering teams working on the Harmony's Edge in silence. Finally, Velkoth spoke. I have been studying the tactical data from the engagement. Your weapons are primitive. Your tactics are aggressive to the point of being dangerous. Yet you won. I do not understand. Patricia turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. What do you want to know, Commander? Why do you still use such old weapons? The galaxy moved beyond kinetic and nuclear weapons millennia ago. Why have humans not done the same? Patricia was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because we understand them, Commander. Humanity spent most of our history at war with ourselves. We refined the art of killing long before we reached the stars. Every weapon we carry was developed through thousands of years of conflict. We know exactly how effective they are because we use them on each other. Velkoth felt a chill run through his body. You fought wars among your own species? Yes, terrible wars. Wars that killed millions. Wars that nearly destroyed our entire planet. We developed nuclear weapons and used them against each other. We built weapons that could end all life on Earth, and we came very close to using them. Patricia's voice was sad now. We learned something from those wars, Commander. We learned that we were very good at killing. Too good. And we learned that the cost of war is too high. That is why we value peace so much now. We know what happens when peace fails. Velkoth tried to process this information. Most species in the galaxy had some history of conflict, but they typically fought other species, not themselves. The idea of a species waging war against itself, developing weapons to use on their own kind, was deeply disturbing. You frighten me, Ambassador. Your species frightens me. You are capable of such violence, yet you came to us seeking peace. You have weapons that can destroy worlds, yet you use them only to protect others. I do not understand how these things can both be true. Patricia's expression softened. Because they must both be true, Commander. The capacity for violence and the desire for peace are not opposites. They are connected. We can be peaceful because we know the alternative. We can value life because we understand death. We can be gentle because we know how to be brutal. She paused, looking out at the stars. Most species in the galaxy seem to have forgotten the cost of war. They fight with clean weapons at long range. Their soldiers rarely see the enemy face to face. Their populations are protected from the reality of combat. But humans remember. We carry the memory of our wars with us, and that memory makes us value peace above almost everything. But it also means, she continued, that when peace fails, when we must fight, we know how to do it. We do not hold back. We do not fight limited wars. We fight to win, to protect, to end the threat as quickly as possible. Not because we enjoy violence, but because we understand that a long war is worse than a short, brutal one. Velkoth was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke again. Your history of violence makes you more peaceful. Our history of violence taught us the value of peace. It taught us that protecting the innocent is worth any cost. It taught us that true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary and when it is not. Patricia turned to face him directly. You asked why we still use old weapons. The answer is simple. Because they work. Because we understand them. Because when we must fight, we want every advantage we can get. Not to conquer or dominate, but to protect. To end the threat quickly so that peace can return. The Krathul came to this station expecting easy prey. They thought we were weak because our technology seemed primitive. They learned the truth. Advanced technology does not make you dangerous. The will to protect others makes you dangerous. The refusal to surrender makes you dangerous. The memory of what war truly cost makes you dangerous. Velkoth understood now. Humans were not dangerous because of their weapons. They were dangerous because of their hearts, because they cared enough to fight, because they valued friendship and loyalty more than their own lives, because they remembered the cost of war and were willing to pay it to protect others. I think, Velkoth said slowly, that the galaxy needs to learn what I learned standing with humans during that battle. What did you learn? I learned fear, real fear, not fear of death. I have faced death many times. I learned fear of what it means to have humans as enemies, and I learned gratitude for having humans as friends. Patricia smiled. We prefer to be friends, Commander. We always prefer peace, but we will always be ready for war, because the only way to keep peace is to be capable of winning wars you never want to fight, Vil. Koth made a gesture of respect with his limbs. I will recommend to the Galactic Council that humanity be granted full membership immediately, not despite what I witnessed in that battle, but because of it. The galaxy needs species who understand both the horror of war and the value of peace. The galaxy needs allies who will stand firm when others flee. The galaxy needs humans. Patricia extended her hand and Velkoth touched it gently with his front limb. It was a gesture of friendship between two very different species. But after what they had been through together, the differences seemed less important than what they shared. A commitment to protecting the innocent. A willingness to stand against evil. A belief that some things are worth fighting for. And an understanding that real peace is not the absence of the capacity for violence, but the choice to use that capacity only when necessary. 6 weeks after the Battle of Crossroads Prime, Ambassador Patricia Monroe stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in circular tiers that rose up to a domed ceiling. Representatives from 43 different species filled the seats, their forms ranging from insectoid to crystalline, to forms that seemed to defy simple description. Captain Holland and Dr. Grant stood beside Patricia on the floor of the chamber. Behind them, the large view screen displayed images from the battle. Tactical recordings showed the Harmony's Edge fighting against impossible odds. They showed the railgun rounds tearing through Krathul's shields. They showed nuclear explosions scattering the enemy fleet. The debate over humanity's application for council membership had been going on for 3 hours. Some species argued that humans were too dangerous. Their capacity for violence was too great. Their weapons were too brutal. They would upset the careful balance of galactic politics. Other species argued the opposite. The humans had saved Crossroads Prime. They had defeated an enemy that had terrorized the outer regions for decades. They had shown courage and honor. They had protected strangers at great cost to themselves. High Chancellor Vexilira, who led the council, was a being made of crystal that reflected light in beautiful patterns. She spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. Ambassador Monroe, you have presented this council with a difficult question. Your species has capabilities that make many of us uncomfortable. Your weapons are brutal. Your tactics are aggressive. Yet your actions at Crossroads Prime saved thousands of lives. How do we reconcile these facts? Patricia stood calmly, her hands clasped in front of her. She had prepared for this moment. High Chancellor, honored council members, humanity does not apologize for our capacity for violence. We earned that capacity through thousands of years of hard lessons. We nearly destroyed ourselves learning how to fight, but we also learned something else. We learned the value of peace. She gestured to the images on the view screen. Yes, we fought at Crossroads Prime. Yes, we used weapons that seem primitive to you, but we did not fight to conquer. We did not fight to take. We fought to protect. That is what humanity does. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We stand with our friends. We refuse to abandon our allies. Some of you fear us because of our weapons. I understand that fear. But I ask you to consider this. Who would you rather have as allies? A species that talks about peace but runs when danger comes? Or a species that will stand beside you in the darkest moments, willing to sacrifice everything to keep you safe? A murmur rippled through the chamber. Patricia waited for it to quiet before continuing. We do not seek to dominate this council. We do not want to impose our will on others. We simply want to be part of the galactic community, to learn from you, to share what we have learned, and to stand ready to help when help is needed. Commander Velkoth rose from his seat in the Zenthari section. The High Chancellor recognized him. High Chancellor, I request permission to speak. Granted. Commander. Velkoth moved to the center of the chamber, facing the assembled representatives. I have served in the Zenthari military for 300 years. I have fought many enemies. I have seen many species show courage in battle, but I had never truly known fear until I stood with humans during the attack on Crossroads Prime. More murmuring. Velkoth continued. I was not afraid of the humans. I was afraid for them. I watched them position their small, damaged ship between the station and the enemy fleet. I watched them refuse to retreat even when retreat was the logical choice. I watched them fight an enemy they could not possibly defeat, all to buy time for strangers they had known for only a few days. He paused, letting his words sink in. But I also felt something else. Something I had not experienced in many years. I felt hope. Hope that in this vast galaxy there are still species who understand loyalty, who understand sacrifice, who understand that some things are worth fighting for. This council has spent decades dealing with species like the Krathul, pirates and raiders who take what they want through force. We have grown comfortable in our civilized society. We have forgotten what it means to stand against real evil. The humans have not forgotten. And we need that. Velkoth turned to face Patricia and her companions. I vote to accept humanity into the Galactic Council, not despite their capacity for violence, but because of it. Because violence in defense of others is not evil. It is justice. And because a galaxy without humans would be a darker, more dangerous place. The vote was called. Patricia watched as the results appeared on the display screens throughout the chamber. 7 species voted against human membership. 12 abstained, wanting more time to study humanity and make sure they understood what they were accepting. But 24 species voted in favor. More than enough for acceptance. High Chancellor Vexilira spoke, her crystalline voice carrying clearly through the chamber. By the authority granted to me by this council, I declare that humanity is hereby accepted as a full member of the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities that membership entails. Welcome to the galactic community. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions. Some species applauded in their various ways. Others remained silent, uncertain about what they had just done. But the decision was made. Humanity had arrived. Later that evening, there was a reception to celebrate the signing of the membership accords. Representatives from many species came to meet the humans, to ask questions, to express congratulations or concerns. Patricia handled them all with diplomatic grace, while Holland answered questions about Earth's military honestly, and Sophie shared information about human culture with her usual enthusiasm. Velkoth found Patricia standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city that surrounded the council building. Lights stretched to the horizon, a metropolis of countless species living and working together. Quite a view, Patricia said as he joined her. Indeed, and now your people will be part of it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Velkoth spoke. I still think about that day, Ambassador, standing in the command center watching your ship fight. I told you I felt real fear, Patricia smiled. And now I understand what that fear meant. It was not fear of your weapons or your tactics. It was fear of your hearts. Fear of a species capable of both infinite compassion and unstoppable fury. Fear of creatures who value friendship more than their own lives. Patricia nodded. We prefer the compassion, Commander, but we keep the fury ready just in case. Velkoth made a gesture of deep respect with his limbs. For the first time I felt real fear while standing with humans. But you know what else I felt? What? Hope, real hope. Hope that the galaxy has allies who will stand firm when others flee. Hope that evil will face justice. Hope that the innocent will have protectors. Hope that friendship and loyalty still mean something. Patricia extended her hand and Velkoth touched it gently with his limb. Thank you, Commander, for seeing past our weapons to understand our hearts, for standing with us, for giving humanity a chance. Thank you, Ambassador, for teaching an old soldier that there are still things worth believing in, worth fighting for, worth protecting. They stood together on the balcony looking out at the city lights, one an ancient alien warrior, the other a human diplomat. But they were friends now, bound by shared danger and mutual respect. The galaxy had changed that day at Crossroads Prime. Humanity had shown what they were capable of. They had shown that beneath their soft exterior was a core of steel, that their primitive weapons could defeat advanced technology, that their loyalty could overcome impossible odds. Word of the battle spread quickly through the galaxy. Pirates and raiders learned to avoid ships with human crews. Peaceful species sought out human friendship. The weak and oppressed hoped for human protection. Humanity had become what they always claimed to be. Friends to those in need, protectors of the innocent, and terrible enemies to those who preyed on the weak. And throughout the galaxy in 1,000 different languages, beings who had heard the story would say the same thing. Humans are friends to have and terrible enemies to make. Stand with them and you have allies who will never abandon you. Stand against them and face the fury of a species that has spent thousands of years learning to win. For the first time, the galaxy understood what it meant to have humans among the stars. And that understanding brought both comfort and fear in equal measure.